everyone, and welcome back to Mentoring Diaries. I am Tuba Ansari, and today's conversation is something I've been reflecting on quite a bit: leadership in the digital age. Because leadership today looks very different from what many of us grew up learning or experiencing. We're working in an environment that are faster, more complex, and far less predictable than before. And in this environment, leadership growth is not just about learning new skill, it's often about unlearning old habits. At IMC, when we mentor leaders, we often notice that what once made someone successful can sometimes limit them in a changing world. And that's why this conversation feels important. I'm really glad, Maria, for joining me today. It's a wonderful opportunity to have you with us. I would request you to share your journey with us through the mentoring lens.
Hi, good evening. I'm happy to be here. It's very interesting that you speak about that because I come from that age. I've had 30 years of leadership experience, and I find myself facing a completely different set of challenges now in the digital age. Far more challenging than it was when I was younger and, learning from traditional leaders. So yes, I'm happy to share the journey that I've been through and the transformation I'm going through even until today.
Maria, when we talk about leadership in the digital age, one thing I keep noticing is that leaders feel pressure to feel, always be certain and decisive. So, from your mentoring experience, I would like to know, what do leaders most need to unlearn and not learn?
It's interesting you said the word certainty. Leaders really need to unlearn being right or having the answers. Previously, in my time, you were measured with actually how well you came up with answers. And right now, leaders have to really unlearn that their role is to give answers. In fact, their role is to create an environment where answers are arrived at more collaboratively. I find that organizations that are currently thriving in AI or the digital environment are organizations that allow their teams to experiment, right? And allow their teams to learn. It's very few of the organizations that succeed actually are organizations where only one leader figured it out. Right now, the answers come from everywhere in the organization. So really what we need to unlearn is really being the source of answers, but actually more being the source of the right questions. I think that's one of the biggest transformation I'm having now. It is unsettling, by the way, when you've had years of knowing the answers. But it is what it is. It's fast moving. Everyone's learning, and there's just so much out there that we don't know about anymore and are unable to predict as leaders.
Definitely, Mari. I mean, I think that's something that really resonates with me because leadership today is more about, having answers. That's what people feel. I mean, leaders feel because it's more about having answers for them. But I feel it's more about creating that space for thinking and learning. And
Yes.
that actually brings me to something more related. Which traditional leadership behavior do you think no longer serve leaders today? And why do they still persist?
Okay. I'll start with answering why they still persist. Organizations currently still continue to reward traditional leadership behaviors in performance metrics, for instance, in performance reviews, in rewards, for that matter. Many organizations still need to sort of change the way they evaluate leadership. Some of the behaviors that persist in this environment, I can name one of them is really a traditional behavior where people think that information flows up and decisions flow down. That whole exchange of information flowing up and decisions flowing down are really slowing decision making. And by the time that happens, it has been months and therefore the landscape has changed. So this is where we need to be able to teach or be able to not really teach, but encourage decision making across all levels. So that whole very traditional hierarchical flow of information and decision is one of those traditional behaviors that sort of need to change. The second assumption is that and a little bit hit with this because I have 30 years of experience, that experience equals expertise. And no, it doesn't happen anymore. There is, of course, value in experience. Experience is an asset. But we're now seeing a change, and therefore experience no longer is the source of expertise. In fact, mentoring becomes mutual. We need to understand that learning can come from different sources. Right? We cannot trump experience as the only source of expertise. Third is that vulnerability is weakness. I think a lot of leaders want to give the right answers precisely because they don't want to seem vulnerable. Being able to confidently say, I don't know, and I'm learning with you is actually the most important thing that will make people succeed and make leaders succeed at the moment. So I think those are sort of three things. So number one would be the whole decision-making process needs to be less hierarchical. Secondly, experience no longer equals expertise. It's the seniority thinking. And the third one is that we have to be vulnerable. We have to be humble, and we have to know that as leaders, we need to learn. And it isn't a weakness to actually say things like, I don't know.
I think I love that, especially when you mentioned about the decision making part, because many experienced leaders, they have built their careers in such a stable system, where control have worked, and letting go of that can feel uncomfortable, even risky for them. So I believe that mentoring definitely can help leader see that trust creates ownership in ways both, where control never could. So
Yes.
yeah, definitely. I mean, that's very important. And something else leaders struggle with today is decision making and uncertainty. So I think,
Yes.
a more, collaboration amongst their team would be more helpful. So how do mentors help leaders make decision when information is incomplete and everything keeps changing?
The first thing is you normalize it. It is normal. It isn't a temporary thing. You will always be faced with a situation where there is no perfect information. And we have to get comfortable with it. It is not a temporary condition. It is an operational reality that information will never be perfect. So the important thing here is we have to teach leaders how to distinguish between reversible and irreversible decisions. And many decisions, a large part of decisions, are really reversible. What do I mean? For instance, I think about digitalization, and I think about experimentation, and I think about creating pilots and proof of concepts. You actually just move forward and decide on the basis of 70% knowledge and learn from it. And what you need to do is increase the speed of feedback. So it is really, one can never really be certain. That's just pretty much it. So the first thing is normalize it. And the second thing is understand that there are certain decisions that are reversible. I remember this is what Amazon would call the two-way door, that employees should never feel threatened by taking decisions when it is a two-way door, right? And many of these decisions on a day-to-day basis are actually two-way. So another way to put it is do not be afraid to make mistakes, right? So you do your due diligence, but learn to accept imperfection.
So I also feel, that especially in case of leaders, the idea of having clarity over certainty is very important. And I often even remind leaders that waiting for perfect information can slow progress, which actually is one of the part that you look into as a part of mentoring, and as it's a kind of a shift that we always talk about, that it's a shift is from moving, from control to clarity. So what do you think about that?
So I go back to answering the role of leaders thinking that they should provide answers. That's control. When you actually talk about control, it is telling people what to do because you feel that that is the only way to do it and that people cannot move without you. That is control. Clarity for me is more important because it does provide context. It's making people understand the why of things, what success looks like, and providing guidance on certain guardrails that cannot be reversed. And that allows people to move faster. So to me, it isn't just about letting go, it's about being clear. And if you know that you have been clear, you can trust, okay? You can trust your team to do it. So with respect to mentoring, it's very hard to let go of control because for the longest time, that is what has made us successful. Being in control of things, not having to depend on people, being the one to do it and being able to set the pace. What we should be doing as mentors is not setting the pace, but sensing the pace and actually understanding and actually being able to adjust around how the pace of things are going. So that to me is clear. Now, if you're clear on the parameters, you're clear on the why. Most important thing, are we clear on the why? Then I think we should be able to trust people with greater certainty. So there.
So it's clarity about certainty is what something I would, put it down across. And that's such an important distinction that you've mentioned, Maria. Because when leader become clear about the direction and purpose, teams don't really need to, have that constant supervision. And that shift can actually feel surprisingly difficult because experienced leaders who are used to being hands-on, problem solvers kind of feel, this particular shift a little difficult. So let's talk about mentoring itself for a moment. And how is mentoring leaders in digital age different from advising, coaching, or managing them?
Advising gives answers straight away. When you advise, you give answers. When you coach, you draw it out, right? When you manage, you hold people accountable, right? When you mentor, you shape the muscle to make good judgment. I think that's the more important thing. It's not just about teaching people. It's not just about telling people what to do. It's actually mentoring helps leaders build judgment even in times of uncertainty. And the way to do that is to actually build the muscle to do it. And that's the big difference. So in times of uncertainty, you cannot always be there to be giving answers, to be advising. Of course, you can be the source of right questions, but at the end of the day, leaders sometimes will have to be left alone and therefore will have to acquire a sense of confidence in terms of the way they make decisions. So that to me is the biggest value of mentoring, guiding through that.
I think that's beautifully said, Maria, because mentoring gives leadership, perspective, and in fast-moving environment, perspective is incredibly valuable. So I think leaders rarely get uninterrupted thinking time, and mentoring creates that space for them. Another thing that we're seeing in organization is leadership showing up everywhere, not just at the top. And I think that's something that has been created through the power of mentoring.
Hmm.
So coming back to my next question, why is leadership at every level so important now, and how can mentors enable that?
Well, I talked about how mentors are able to enable leadership by actually creating that muscle for them to actually make the right calls, get comfortable with uncertainty, get comfortable with imperfect information. But the more important thing is we actually have to mentor at different levels because the ones who are positioned to actually solve problems are the ones that are closest to it. It isn't someone who sits in the ivory tower being able to give you the answers all the time. Top leadership is important for visioning, but the ones who actually make things happen are the ones that are sitting closest to the problem. So mentoring the C-suite is important, but mentoring even below the C-suite is equally as important. I forgot to mention earlier, it is also important because mentoring is mutual. Seniority doesn't give you monopoly of the answers. And therefore, when you actually mentor people below the C-suite, the learning becomes more rich. Right? So I think that's I don't know if I answered your question. I think that
No, that's definitely something that I resonate with too, because when people start seeing that leadership as behavior instead of title, I think culture begins to shift there. And according to me, mentoring definitely plays such a powerful role in building that confidence. And, if we talk about something very real, balancing technology performance and human experience is very, very important. And that is something we learn, as a part of mentorship. So, how do mentors help leaders manage this balance without losing trust?
okay, so the key word is balance. It's not a trade-off. Human technology and people have to work together to create that kind of balance. Now, you help leaders by actually making sure that change management is properly incorporated in everything that we do. What does it mean? When we deploy technology, we always take into account people. We always ask the question, who is affected? We ask the question, how are they affected? We ask the question, what are we asking people to give up by bringing technology in? When we start to bring technology and not take into account people, people lose trust in leadership and people lose trust in technology. So again, it is not a trade-off, it is balance.
I mean, I think technology is something that changes very quickly, and as humans, we don't. So people still need to be feel heard, valued, and trusted, and that's where the balance is very important because mentoring, helps leaders stay connected to that human side of leadership, which is again
Yes.
one of the most important factor. So if mentoring could focus on just one unlearning to prepare leaders for the future, what should it be?
Unlearning needs to happen from what needs to be unlearned is the belief that leaders' value comes from being right. We have to unlearn that. And why? Because it actually creates a behavior of humility. The moment leaders think that their value comes in by showing people they are right, they stop learning. They start giving answers and they stop asking questions and they stop encouraging collaboration. Why? Because I am right. Leaders value doesn't come from being right. It comes from being able to surface the answers from other people, right? It also comes from teaching others or seeing others find their voice in the whole thing. And the moment you think that your value is being right, you stop seeing others for their value and stop accepting that other people could have better answers than you. And that, in fact, your goal is to develop leaders who are better than you. So
I think that's something very powerful. For me, I think the biggest unlearning is the belief that leaders must be indispensable. The strongest leaders today are the one who makes others capable, and I think that is the most important part as leaders, that we should feel that others are also capable enough and develop
yes,
them into those leadership skills.
that's
and
true.
and I think that particular shift has come because of mentoring. So this has been a very thoughtful conversation, Maria. Let's
Okay.
do a quick fireside round. Whatever comes to your mind. So
Okay.
one leadership habit that needs retiring.
Oh, hoarding information. The best leaders actually are the ones who communicate. Monopoly of information is no longer your value, and therefore hoarding information is a habit that leaders must learn to retire.
One skill leader overestimate today.
Strategic planning. How do I say it? I find that leaders spend months. This is the cycle of corporations. And by the way, I'm from corporate, so this is what I'm thinking about. Strategic planning, you spend months doing strategic planning when in fact, by the time you're done with it, information has changed, things have changed. What people underestimate is your ability to sense change and where strategy needs to shift. So short answer, overestimated is strategic planning skills in the traditional sense of the word.
One behavior that builds trust faster.
Oh, it's not the big things. It's following up on the small things. Showing up, being consistent, answering emails on time, not ghosting texts from your team, and just really doing the things you said you're gonna do. So it's really the small things that build trust. It's not that one big thing. So following up on small things.
One question every leader should ask more often.
What am I missing? It's really asking that question all the time. What am I not seeing? What am I missing? Because it invites contribution. It invites collaboration from anyone you speak with.
So I think the mindset for continuous learning is something that every leader should have.
Yes, yes.
One word that defines effective leadership now.
Oh, you just said it earlier, clarity. Clarity. Effective leaders need to provide clarity and context all the time.
Thank you, Maria, for bringing up not just your experience, but honesty into the space. There were a lot of things that I could personally resonate with. And, one thing that mentoring definitely keeps reminding me is that leadership growth today is less about control and more about awareness and clarity, as we discussed. Mentors don't lead for leaders. They basically help leaders see differently and often where real change begins. So, if today's conversation gave you something to think about, just sit with it. Change often starts quietly with a single insight. Until we meet again, take care of yourself and each other.
Thank you.